So we're really privileged to have David Atchison to be our moderator today. So I'll turn the time over to him now to get us started.
Thank you. Welcome. We are a town hall format, which means that you've been able to submit questions in advance. And what I'll do is I'll have you come to the microphone and repeat your question. Part of that is certainly I could read those questions and it would be as straightforward. But what we want with a town hall format is for the candidates to see who the questions are coming from, because you are soon to be their constituent. And so it's a great opportunity for a more personal way and a more personal connection. So Karen, can we start with you and have you come forward and ask one of your questions, and I'll hand you your card so you don't have to remember.
Can I change my question?
Yeah. Yes, and then you can change your question. There you go. If you'll just stay right there and ask your second question in a minute, okay? And what'll happen is, so the member of the audience will ask their question, and then we'll alternate between the two of you in terms of who answers first. And then each candidate has a total of 30 minutes for responses this evening. So if they cared to, with this very first question Karen's about to ask, they could take all 30 minutes. But they wouldn't have an opportunity then to answer any other questions. So we've got timers here, thank you. And so with that, we'll start with your question, and your first question, and then Alex, we'll let you go first. Okay.
Campaigns are very difficult. I know a little bit about that. So you really have to have a reason to run. So what was your primary motivation in running for District 57?
Okay, so use this. That's a great question. So I've been, a lot of you know, this is my first time running for office in any capacity. A lot of the reason why I got in was because things kind of just fell into place for my family, and I've always wanted to run for office. Now this is a little earlier than I thought that I would run, but when I found out Brian Green wasn't running, I looked at who was running, and I decided, well, there's enough of a difference there possibly that we could have two options. It's not taking anything away from John, but I just wanted to be able to provide another option. So that's why I got in.
Great. John?
That was right in time.
There you go.
So I've always wanted to run for public office. I've been interested in government and since about 4th grade. And I really wanted to be able to represent people. I love being among people, around people, hearing thoughts and ideas that they have, and I want to be able to take their thoughts and ideas and implement strategies to help drive positive solutions for our community. So that's why I got involved in the race.
Great. Next one.
Okay. Also, as we look at candidates, association is critical to really understand where you come from and where you align. So in the State House and Senate, who do you most relate to and why?
Go ahead, John, first. Okay.
I've had a number of the current representatives reach out to me. I would say the support that I've received from our current district senator, Dan Hemmert, has been overwhelming. I think he and I align quite closely. We kind of grew up together, so our backgrounds are similar. Our fathers are very good friends, and so that kind of comes naturally to us. I would also say Representative McKell down in Spanish Fork. He's reached out to me and has provided some great ideas and great communication around what's happening and how things get done. So I would say those two would probably be the biggest influences on me in the House and Senate.
Well, that's a great question. It's kind of been a whirlwind, getting into this process, going up to Capitol and meeting everybody, and there's a lot of fine people up there, so we're blessed in Utah for sure. So I think the question was, who do I most associate with, or who I would align with, I guess. certainly, probably nobody 100%, that would be pretty impossible, but I think I would align myself mostly with probably Mark Roberts. Is one of the ones that I think we've gotten along really well. He's a fine person, and we see eye to eye on most things. It's no secret that Brian Green has endorsed me, and we see eye to eye on a lot of things as well. Probably not everything, but closely on a lot of our principles at least. I really like Kay Christopherson. I think that he's done a fine job, and we get along great. That's just a couple off the top of my head, but there's a lot that I've met and I probably am missing, but those are the three that come off.
All right, go ahead and hold on to that microphone. Julio, do you want to come forward?
Sure.
There you go.
Good evening. First of all, John and Alex, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve. I know it's not easy to do that, especially when you put your lives on front and when people scrutinize you or criticize you, and when you sacrifice your time and your family. So thanks for that. I got a couple of questions. The first one is, what qualifications do you have to be an effective legislator?
Qualifications. So that's a great question. Well, I think the biggest qualification would be that I have a drive to try and do what's right and to see that it's done. The biggest guiding document in my life would be the Constitution. I believe that it was inspired by God, and I think that it's a worthy thing to try and fight for the principles contained therein. So I have a love for the Constitution, a love for this country, and I think that's probably most important. Another thing that I think qualifies me to hold this position would be that I was born in this area. I understand the people in this area, and I've worked just like every other everyday, Utah County person, right? I've held positions, that are, I guess, relatable. I'm a mechanic, and was able to get to the point of where we could start our own company. Small business owner. I understand what it means to make a budget, to run tight on things. We've had good days, we've had bad days, and I think that those lessons that I've learned in that area would translate. So I don't have the some of the degrees that maybe other people have, but I think I have real life experience, the school of hard knocks, and hopefully that relates.
So I think for me, so I have an MBA from BYU. I got it in 2010. During that time, I started a business unsuccessfully because of the economy. But I've got 8.5 years experience as a manager in a public relations firm, or several public relations firms. I currently hold a job at Workfront in Lehigh as a manager of sales engineering on the east half of the United States, which has enabled me to meet with major international organizations, Nike, Coca-Cola, Disney Company, just to name a couple of them. And working with them has given me the ability to help me understand and them understand how to be more efficient with budgets, with time, with resources. And I can bring that experience to the table in our district and in the state to be able to help run governments more efficiently as well.
My last question is, how do you base your decision making on anything that you do?
Say that again. Sorry, Julio.
How do you base your decision making?
Decisions are, I think there's multifaceted ways that I make decisions. Number one is study. You have to know the issue. You have to be able to understand the nuances of the issue at hand. And that involves conversations with lots of different people that may not agree with you, people that you don't see eye to eye with, people that might just flat out not like you at all, right? But trying to understand their points of view, even if you don't agree with it. And then a lot of prayer. we're a religious community, and I fall in line with that. And, you know, my values are based on those values, right? And so I pray a lot, and after studying it out and trying to figure out how I can best make decisions. So that's how I base my decision making.
I think it's a great question. The first thing I would say is, I guess I should clarify, are you asking how I would make a decision as a representative?
Sure.
So I would take it this way. Every decision that I would make would be based on principle. What's the proper role of government in that situation, and then move forward from there. I would do a lot of the same things John does. I'd want to know every side. I'd want to know positions of people who are involved. I'd want to get I'd want to get answers from people who are right on the front lines. And I would echo exactly what he said. I would be prayerful about it as well. And that's how I go, but kind of in that process. So.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Matt, want to come up and ask your question?
It's really related to the last one, but maybe specifically, when you encounter a bill that you feel you are lacking in knowledge and understanding to confidently vote on what is your action plan before you actually vote. So if you have this bill that you really don't understand everything, what's your action plan to attack it?
Yeah, I would approach it with something similar to what I said previously, but I'll expand on it a little bit. I would want to know both sides. I would want to know the arguments for and against. I would look at what the role of representative really is, the role of government is in that. Given it's going to be case by case, right? You're going to have issues that are going to be all over the map, and I would want to know what is the role of government? How do we protect rights? And I would move forward from there. I'd want to know what the implications are going to be. In the end, what is it? Is it going to be a budget item? Is it going to be a moral issue? Whatever it is, I want to know. Want to try to foresee what kind of ramifications it would have in the end. So that's the way I would approach that.
I would want to seek out the experts on the issue. I'm not an expert on most issues. I'm learning that more and more every day. But I would want to seek out the experts and get their understanding. For example, transportation. I'm not a civil engineer, so I would want to go talk to people that are civil engineers that deal with not just bridge building and things like that, but transportation engineering, and figure out what is the best way to solve problems in that arena. Medicine, I'm not a doctor. My wife is a nurse, but her expertise only goes so far. So I'd want to go talk to a number of doctors that have expertise in whatever area that we're talking about. So I would want to seek out experts. I'd want to talk to other legislators and get their thoughts and opinions, and of course bring it back to the constituents here in our district so that I'm voting according to the expertise and the district thoughts and feelings on a specific issue.
Let's find out where we are on time. Alex, how much time does Alex have left?
25 minutes.
Excellent. And John, how much has he got left?
26 minutes.
Whoa, okay. So,
I'm not using
John,
enough
I've
time.
got a question here on cannabis, but no name.
I forgot to put my name on.
Come on up. And you've got two questions.
Yes. All right, awesome. First one first. What are your thoughts on medical cannabis?
Take it away, John.
I knew this one was going to come up. I'd want to research it out more. I know that there's really good benefits to medical cannabis, but I know that there's a lot of harmful effects as well. There's other alternatives, I believe. CBD oils, they don't have the hallucinogenic properties that marijuana has. And so I want to really research it out further before making a decision on what what we do as a state.
Well, this is a great question. This is one of the topics that I've been looking into a lot lately. And right now, medical cannabis, I would be for it, and for a lot of reasons. There are people out there. There's enough studies out there that I've seen that at least I think gives some hope for some people with different diseases, different things that are going on. I've talked to people that have epilepsy. I've talked to people that have MS. Sjogren's disease, some areas where they have actually tried it and they've actually tested it, and they say it's the only thing that works. I was knocking on doors the other night and I ran into a gentleman who it was kind of makes me emotional, but he sat there and after 30 minutes he was talking about it, and I felt for him. He was begging me. He's like, if you get elected, you got to help me. This is the only thing that works. He was in a medically induced coma for so long, and it's ruined his life, and the only thing that's helping him get back on track is this cannabis. And he's like, you've got to help me. We've got to get this thing passed. We've got to get it through. And I know that it's it's a tricky thing when you take emotion into it. There's a lot of emotion in this issue. But from what I can see, and the people that have tried it, people that have tested it, there's enough information for me that I would be pro at this point. Now, recreational use, I don't know that I can get on board with, but medical cannabis for sure.
And my second question, can you talk to us about the balance between protecting children and parental rights?
Well, I'll go back to the way that I was raised, and I can remember that every now and then I deserved a little bit of a beat down, right? So, and that's the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question. So, I think that I'm going to always probably err on the side of parental rights when there's obvious child abuse, things like that. Yeah, there's something that's got to happen there. But the old traditional form of discipline, I would be in favor of parents using that. Of course, it's up to them. I want them to be able to make that choice. So parental rights are important for me. I think that they ought to have rights in all different areas, not just discipline, but maybe education, things like that. We need to defer to their, to their decision making first. And the state should really probably step back as much as possible there. Now, if the rights of the child are being abused, then the state needs to step in. But hopefully, that's on a rare basis. I hope that answers
I was
it.
thinking more of like when it comes to medical care of children, like the child in the UK that the hospital got custody of the kid and they killed it.
Yeah, I know that issue. It
things
frustrated
like that.
me.
Yeah.
I would definitely be on the side of the parents there, and I was during that issue. I was hoping that that could have been resolved better. So, yeah, hopefully that answers it.
So in that specific case, absolutely parents should be in charge of the child's health and not have the government step in and take over, even if it's a hospital, which in the UK it is one and the same, right? So I laughed initially when you asked this, because if you ask my 13-year-old, disciplining is taking away her rights. But we grow up. We live in a different age than we grew up in, and I was never bad enough to deserve a beating, Alex. But we tease around with my parents about some of the discipline that they had. I use some of that as well. You have to get kids' attention every once in a while and get them away from electronics. Is the big issue in my house. And so sometimes some discipline is needed. I think the key, though, is after the discipline is over, that they know that they are loved by parents who will do anything to protect them as well.
Great. Thank you. Mike Sandberg. On down.
You're the next contestant.
You're the next contestant.
I'm going to throw in a question before the question I had written here, just because I want to make sure I really understand your position on the cannabis issue. So I think a lot of people are not, in theory, opposed to cannabis as a treatment. but the initiative is currently before the state. Would you support that or vote against it?
Well, it's an initiative that is gonna probably be on the ballot, right?
So that's what I'm asking, is like.
So if the people vote for it, then
No, but where would you?
No, that's not his
personally-
question. His question is, what would you do?
How would you vote on that initiative today?
I would vote probably no today. And the reason is because I think it's a slippery slope. I think we've seen it in neighboring states where it was medical in the first place, and then it has become recreational, and it hasn't been the boon to the economy that they thought. In fact, it's kind of been a drain on the economy. And so I would be really, really careful about where we're going with cannabis. There's other alternatives, as I mentioned, that don't have the negative properties that marijuana has. And so I would be in favor of those over the marijuana right now.
Okay.
Great. Alex?
So there are a lot of things that I don't like about the initiative. When I say I'm pro cannabis, I do think that there needs to be some regulations. I don't want to be Las Vegas where there's for lack of a better term, there's a pod store on every corner. I don't want that. I don't envision that for Utah. But I do think that there are enough reasons to vote for cannabis. So on that initiative, I'm still in the air on that. I think that's something with the legislature, a bill that came forward. I would rather be for that. So right now, I'm not sure I could support the initiative itself, but I would be for doing something later on as far as the bill goes.
Great, thank you. The next question is, so I haven't been to one of these sorts of events for a long time. I used to come out fairly regularly. And it's because, frankly, I'm really disaffected with the Republican Party. And so I want to know I want you to talk to me about a time when you disagreed with the Republican Party or one of its candidates, and have you ever not voted for a Republican? I want to basically know, are you a pure party man? Or have you actually disagreed enough that you would vote against something that the party has maybe stood up for here in the state or at the national level? And have you ever gone to the extent of, even though you're a declared Republican, you said, no, I can't support that person? I don't need to know the specific person, but I want to understand the reasons why you felt like you needed to go against the party. Because I'm this close to leaving the party right now because I'm frustrated.
Don't do it, Mike. So yeah, I don't have a problem saying names. I did vote for Donald Trump, and I did vote for Evan McMullen, not because was in his wheelhouse, but I didn't believe Donald Trump when he was first running. I was a Ted Cruz supporter, and so no, I'm not a. If I see the R, I mark the box. I want to know who they are. I want to know what they stand for, and I didn't believe a lot of what Donald Trump says. Now, since then, Donald Trump has surprised me, and he has stuck to a lot of his campaign promises. So he's not the liar I thought he was. I know that's a harsh term, but I think he's done exactly what he said he's going to do. He's still got Donald Trump that comes along with it, unfortunately, with a lot of his social media stuff. But yeah, that's one time where I didn't vote the Republican ticket.
Are there any state level things that you're like, I don't support what the party's saying?
Boy, I'd have to think about that for a minute. I'm sure there probably is. A lot of the bills I've been looking back past, and there's different ways I would have voted, and I apologize, I can't think of one off the top of my head right now. That was the first one that came to my mind. But I'll kick it around and let you know if I think of something.
So I've voted independent every once in a while. I did vote for Donald Trump because I felt like he was the better of the two major party candidates, but I labored over it for a long, long time. And I think that he's done a really decent job as the president of our country. I don't like some of the social media and the behavioral antics that he pulls, but I think that's part of just his ego and his persona. I can't think of any, like, there's been bonds that I haven't voted for. There's been things that, you know, on the state level, and maybe even the local level, county level, that I haven't agreed with. So I can't think of anything very specific off the top of my head. But you know, I think overall the Republican Party is a system of values and principles that are core to who I am as a person. So I've tried to stay, you know, with the party, but not always. So, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Mike, there is help, there's a support. Just know that. Christy Belt. We don't want to put you on the less active list. Because you know what happens
We
then?
need ministers. over
Two, yeah,
there.
we need that minister too.
Okay, so do you think there should be and I don't know if this is state representative, but if there's someone at the, say, county level who's doing stuff that's not good and everyone wants this particular person out for different sexual harassment type behavior, do you think there should be a legal way that the state Senate representative should be able to step in and remove that person from office?
I think there should be, but it's called impeachment, isn't it? There is a way to do it. I don't know if there is at the county level. I think we ought to ask our county official here to come answer this question. But yeah, I think there should be a way to remove people from office if they don't represent the people that they were voted to represent. Does that make sense? Yeah, so absolutely.
Who are you talking about? Just kidding, don't answer. Yeah, I got the same question. I don't know what kind of process there is, and honestly, I'm not sure that there is one, because I think that if there were, it'd probably happen by now. So I'm not sure what kind of process there is. I would have to look at it, and I'd have to decide what kind of authority does the state have there. I'm not sure they do. I don't know if that's something that maybe, I think the county attorney would be the one that you'd have to go to on that, and probably see. I think they would be the one that would have the authority there.
Alex, I'm going to interrupt, and Christy, your question is spot on, right? So her question is, what would you do? What within your power? Read your question
Okay.
again, right? And so it's not, for both of you, the question is not, what's the current state of affairs?
What would I do?
It's, am I right?
Yeah.
So if I had the authority.
Sure,
Right.
well, if you were a
If you were
legislator.
elected.
If you were elected, and what would you do?
I would call for them to step down first thing, and then I would hope that they would respond and do that. If that didn't happen, then I would look for any path that we could take to remove. If there was evidence there, which there is.
I'm still going to ask just a little more, which is, would you, remember, so neither of you is a legislator, correct, right now? Okay.
Right.
Have you ever been a legislator?
No.
Have you ever been in an elected position? Okay. You're both running for a position that's going to be elected, and you're going to have some power with that, and people are trying to make a decision about whether you should be the guy with the power, right? So the question is, with the power to do pretty much anything, introduce a bill, for example, you can introduce pretty much any
Okay.
bill you want to introduce. What would you, now ask your question again.
Okay.
Am I right, am I on the right track?
You're totally on the right
All
track.
right.
Okay, a legal way to fire or impeach people who are elected. What would you do so that we don't have elected officials able to run amok and do whatever they want with no consequences and no one above them saying, kicking them out?
Okay, Alex, answer, and then John, you'll get a second chance.
So if it's talking about a bill or anything like that, then yeah, I do think there needs to be a path, and I would support it. It would need to be a bill that had some teeth to it, though, and I'll explain. It can't be just on accusations, because that's obviously not correct, and they do have the right to defend themselves in a certain situation. But if there was enough evidence and those would all have to be particulars in there, then yes, I would be in favor of a path or a way to remove somebody out of office who has clearly violated their position of trust. I hope does that answer it?
We'll let them decide.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be due process, right? Whether that's in the court of opinion or the court of justice. There needs to be a way to remove people who are not truly representing their constituents. That they've been voted in to hold this position of power, right? And they've either neglected that power or they've abused that power. There needs to be a way to remove it. Now, for the state legislature in the House, there's a real easy way to do that, and that's voting every 2 years, right? In the state Senate, it's a little bit longer. So there needs to be a way to remove office holders. And I would support a bill to do that.
Great. You've got another question, please.
Okay, so, gas tax, I live in Pleasant Grove, love Pleasant Grove. So we voted, as a county, we voted no on the UTA gas hike thing that was up in the Senate, or the House, both of them. So now it comes down, so after we voted no, the powers that be have said that it has to be put in, and if the counties, or I think it's the counties don't put it in, then the state will put it in or something. So basically, they gave us something to vote for, the people voted no, the majority, and now they're saying, well, you have to do it anyway. Are you supportive of that? Are you unsupportive of that? And on the same token, are you am I out of time?
You don't run out of time.
Are you supportive of the UTA changing their name, or do you support the governor saying, no, don't change the name, keep the name? So they're kind of both UTA
So-
tax related.
There's a lot of questions in there. Let me try to answer them if I can.
Give us the first one again, Kristen.
Okay,
Just
sorry,
You're
just
great.
one
No,
at
this
a
is
time.
great.
Okay, so how do you feel when an initiative or a bond or whatever it was is put up for the public to vote on? The public votes no or yes, and then the Senate and representatives then force the county or the people to do it anyway. And say, well, I know you voted no, but we think this is good, so you have to do it anyway. What are your thoughts?
So, I'm really not in favor of the government telling people what they can and can't do, especially when they have voted against it. I'll give you an example, and this might get me into hot water. In Utah, we voted for a constitutional amendment, right, for marriage. And that was passed, but then the government came in and told us that we couldn't have that amendment. I'm not in favor of that, right? And I use that one as just a specific example, because it's a recent one, right? And so generally, I'm not in favor of the government telling the people what they have to do when the people have spoken and said, no, we don't want to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't support it either. Yeah, it's a classic example of government overreach, and those are the things that drive me crazy. And one of the big reasons why I want to be a voice up there for everybody here. If the people have spoken, why go over their head? I mean, why do that? And I'll give you the answer. The government doesn't like to live within its means. And anytime that they can get more money from people, they're going to do it. Why did we do that when we had a surplus this year? Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So anytime that they can seem to get more money, they do it. And that's on all levels. That's on all levels. And so the government needs money to function. I get that. But the solution isn't always to raise taxes. And so that would be a key issue for me. If there's ever talk of a tax increase, I want to know why. What is it going for? Is there areas that we could reduce and not have to do it? So short answer, no, I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
And then my follow-up, and you can just say yes or no, would you vote for the UTA name change or against it?
Against.
So I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth. Rebranding, so my company rebranded about 4 years ago now, a little over 4 years ago now. And it's a painful, painful process. So I would say absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with the initials UTA. Let's just keep them.
Great, thank you. Ammon Carter, come on down.
Okay, so, kind of a topic going on here. What is your views on count my vote versus keep my voice? What's your opinion?
That's a great question. I think they're both valuable. I know they go counter to each other, but they both have merit. I did gather signatures, as you're aware, and I did the convention process, as you're aware. And I think that the opportunity to get out and involve people in the community in the selection process was really a valuable opportunity for me. And I've received feedback that people were grateful for it, that I was willing to go knock on their door, interrupt their day, and gather their signature, right? I think that there's value in both. Because what happens is, as you get more people involved, we all win, okay? And saying that someone has to be at a certain place on a certain night when we all have really, really busy lives that we live makes it difficult to have an election process that is inclusive of multiple different viewpoints.
Well, my issue with this kind of takes a different turn. I don't have an issue with the signature gathering process, and I think that John's right, there is merit in both ways. My issue with SB 54 in and of itself is on principle, and that is I don't believe that the government has the right to tell a private organization how it selects its candidates. So that's my argument with it. Whatever the path the party wants to go is fine, and we'll use that path, and I'll use whatever path the Republican Party wants to go. But that's my argument against SB 54 is that I don't think it was a proper role of government to do that.
We're going to do a time check here. Alex has got how much time left?
Oh, Alex, sorry,
Yes.
sorry. 16:28.
Great. And John?
17.
Oh, you guys are so good, so close. Anna, do you want to ask this second question?
Yep.
Maybe it just got answered a little bit, but.
It did a little bit, but Alex mentioned this already, but should the government be able to dictate how a private organization operates if that organization is not causing harm to others or using taxpayer funds? When's it appropriate if it is okay?
Well, the government, okay. The government has in my opinion, has the authority to step in when rights are being violated. Hopefully that answers it. Yeah, that's where I would leave it. The government has the right to step in when rights are being violated. Other than that, I would try to not.
I would say that the government has the responsibility to protect life and liberty, right? So similar to what Alex was saying. And so sometimes there's not taxpayer money being inserted into a private entity, and there's no real harm being done by a private entity, but there sometimes needs to be a regulation so that those boundaries aren't crossed. Does that make sense? And so to put in, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, probably water. We'll talk about water for a second. To put in regulations on how water is filtered, even though it's not, really, it can harm people. that's not a really good example. I can't think of one, but the government should be able to say, these are the boundaries that you can work within. And as long as you're working within those boundaries, then you're okay. And on, not everything, right, not everything, but on occasion, when it warrants it.
Maureen Miles. Did I get the name right?
Thanks, Ann.
I think you got it, right? You know we wrote it. Go for it. Yes.
Okay, I just want to know both of your opinions on the Convention of States, where you stand.
So Maureen, you're talking about the, Fifth Article? Article 5, yeah, it was 5. Drew a blank there for a second. I think we need to be really careful when it comes to Article 5, because Article 5 it has the potential to pretty much wipe out the entire Constitution if we're not careful. People can, the states can get together, as we know, and vote down every single amendment that's ever been passed by, on the Constitution. So we need to be really careful. But as long as there's a valid reason, and that's the sole reason that we're meeting, then we need to look at it. So
The Constitution was a result of a Convention of States, right? So there are some places in history where it has been used, and the results have been varied. Obviously, the original one was the results were fantastic. I don't think it's time right now. If you're referring to the movement right now, there's a lot of people on talk radio talking about it, how we need to do it. I'm not confident that it's time right now. I don't think that it's necessary. But I'm thinking if there's some major government overreach where the states' rights are being absolutely walked on, past administrations, people felt that way. The current administration, I feel like maybe the federal government's getting back in its place a little bit, so I think the tension is kind of eased. I agree with John. It's the nuclear button. It's the thing that you don't want to have to do, but it's there when it's necessary. So for me to vote for it, if they come to the state of Utah and say, "Are you going to be in?" For me to vote for it, I've got to have good reason. I've got to have really good reason, and I want a plan. I want to know that we're going to be able to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, whatever it may need to be. If we're going to put the federal government back in its place, I want a plan to do so. So yeah, it's a last ditch effort.
Craig Thorne. Thanks, man. Sorry.
Okay, I think you might be able to use up more time on this than Justin. Okay, what are the 3 biggest issues facing PG and Utah?
PG and Utah, okay. I suppose they're the same, probably. We got growth happening right now. It's happening, really fast. I kind of feel like we're scrambling at times to deal with that growth. So with that growth, you've got questions about education, you've got questions about transportation, and you've got questions about air quality. What's going to happen? Those are the 3 biggest issues. Did you want an expansion on that, or just want to know what the 3 issues are?
It's up to you.
Okay, so if you're going to start at the top, I think we need to be prepared to deal with those things, start with education. I think it's important to be able to get education back down to where decisions are being made at the teacher, parent, child level. I think that the goal ought to be to make sure that the dollars are hitting the classroom where the child is. What I mean by that is, hopefully they're making their way down. They're not getting stuffed at administration or at the district level, whatever it is. I think the goal would be to get the decision making there and get the dollars closest to the child as possible. And I would look at every effort to make sure that we don't have to raise taxes to do that. If we need to reallocate funds from wherever, we would do that. That would be my goal. And then transportation is a big issue, right? and John's talked a little bit about this, there's real no, perfect answer here, but I would look to the private sector to see what they're doing. Look at Uber and Lyft. They're doing a fantastic job. I use them, and when we go on vacation, things like that, it's really handy. Why can't we take some lessons from the private sector? I'm not saying we need to turn UTA into one of those things, but the private sector always comes up with better ideas than the government. And we need to look to them, see what's working, and try to apply those lessons that they're learning. So I would look there and do that. UTA needs some help for sure, and we would definitely want to look at that and plan in the future on how we're going to attack the transportation issue. And the third one is air quality, and we've got an issue there, and there's no real fix-all there as well. It's a concern, and the growth is only going to make it worse. So we've got some good things that are happening with the gasoline that we're using now, the top-tier gasolines that we're using. Cars are getting better made. So I think we're naturally moving in that right direction, but it's something to think about with what's going forward. Those are the three off the top of my head.
I don't know if I'm going to use that much time. No. I would, as Alex was answering, I was writing down exactly what I was going to say, and he talked about what I was going to say. I talked to Rob Smith out of Alpine School District and had a great conversation with him about what are his concerns and what are the things that he's focused on from the school district perspective. And his number one thing was growth. Northern Utah County, and you've heard me say this before, Northern Utah County is expected to grow by 500,000 people in the next 32 years. That's the current population, current population of all of Utah County. And that's Pleasant Grove and North. Where are we going to put them all? And how are we going to be able to manage that type of growth from an infrastructure perspective, from an economic perspective, from an environmental perspective, not only air quality, as Alex mentioned, but water. We live in a desert, right? And we're constantly being told we need to conserve, right? If you conserve, you can save. Well, if we're being told right now that we need to conserve water, what's going to happen when we have an additional 500,000 people in our county, in our northern Utah County? Where's all the water going to come from? So we need to be really careful about our approach to growth. It can't be a Band-Aid application to infrastructure. It can't be a Band-Aid application to education. It can't be a Band-Aid application to the environment. It has to be much more longer-term perspective and ideas with regards to the growth of our state, of our county, and of our district. So that's great.
May I ask, because part of Greg's question was local, but statewide also. I personally like to hear a little more than just growth. So is that okay, Greg?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges that faces Utah as a state, and I see this from my business experience, and we're getting better at it. So let me caveat my comment real quick by saying that we're getting better at it, is diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of, and bringing in different voices that, Utah's had 150 years of being an insulated state, right? A little state out west that nobody really knew. Well, that opened up when we had the Olympics and people started saying, man, Utah's a great place. I interview people all the time for positions at Workfront, and they come from, a lot of them are coming from Atlanta right now, but back east. And when they fly out here, they're amazed at the beauty of our state, and they actually want to come live here as their permanent resident. And so it's getting better, but we need to have that diversity of thought and of ideas that make a community great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right. Are you referring to the bubble around the state? Is that what?
I don't know what bubble you're talking about.
I hear that all the time. You go out of the state, well, you live in the bubble. Anyway, I think you're right with that. I'll take it a step further. What worries me about with the growth that's happening is I'm worried that government is going to want to grow with it. And what I mean by that is, obviously, we need to grow infrastructure. Things like that. We got to have a law enforcement. We've got to have those core functions of the government. What I don't want to have happen is regulations get out of control. I don't want our rights being trampled. I don't want to regulate businesses and tax them in a way that we push this growth back out. So that worries me. The reason that we've grown the way we have is because we have a principled, conservative area that is friendly to businesses. We allow all thoughts to come in. We're liberty-minded here. You got freedom when you come here. You got freedom as a business. You got freedom as a person. You can do all sorts of wonderful things. I don't want to lose that. I don't want the government to get big enough to where it starts to chase that out. So that's a concern for me at the state level. And I would work as a representative to make sure that that didn't happen.
Can I add one other thing?
Sure.
As you're talking, it made me think of jobs in the economy. So I attended the Silicon Slopes Summit in January, and the governor was talking about, and some of the leaders up there were talking about the number of jobs that are open in the state. There's 4,000 tech jobs that were open in the state in January, and there were only 400 people in the state that could fill those roles. Right. So we need to have that diversity to help stimulate and grow our economy as well. So.
Okay. Do you have anything more you wanted to say on that, Alex? Okay. You don't have to. I've got one here that doesn't have a name on it, and I'll go ahead and ask this, which is, so when it comes to a bill, how will you make a decision on if a bill should be passed or not, or rewritten, or perhaps a new one written?
I think it depends on. I think it depends on the bill. I don't know that I can answer that question really well. I really just think about what is the issue that we're talking about within the bill. I'm not a lawyer, just FYI. I'm not a lawyer. I would hope that bills are well written. Obviously, legalese is a different language, but well written isn't, I think, what is meant by that. I think it's well-meaning is probably the right way to put that in my mind. So I really think it just comes down to the issue at hand and whether what we're trying to accomplish with that bill is a positive thing for the state, a positive thing for the district, a positive thing for the people of Utah.
So anything that comes up is considered a bill, right? And that bill might be to enact a new law or reverse a law or do something like that. So it's a case by case. We're gonna look at the bill. What is it trying to accomplish? What's it doing? So the decisions have got to be made from that standpoint, moving forward, I guess. So we would look at all those things and see what is the goal here and make a decision from that point. Hopefully that.
Don't know. Let them figure it out. That's the question. I am going to put a filter on it though,
Okay.
which is I'm going to read between the lines a little bit, and I don't know if they intended this, but it's what is the filter that you will use? What's your filter for determining whether a bill is good or bad?
Yeah, so I would apply constitutional principles to it. Does it protect rights? And then moving forward, I would definitely want to get some input from different people on who it's going to affect. So that's how I look at it. A lot of those bills that like John said, I'm not a lawyer either, right? So a lot of them I've got to read 2 or 3 times to be able to understand it. So I would get with people to be able to understand what's the intent here. What are we trying to accomplish? And go forward from there. and then decide whether or not it protects rights or if it's an overstep of the government. And I would obviously want to get some input. I'd like to know what the people in the district think about it, and go from there.
First of all, I just want to congratulate the Pleasant Grove Vikings for winning the state championship tonight. So, I was up there this afternoon, and I know this doesn't answer the question, but you can take it away from my time if you want. I was up there this afternoon, and they were doing well, so I'm excited for them. I would want to apply, the Constitution as well to it. Does the bill protect life and liberty? Does it protect citizens' ability to thrive in the economy? Does it protect our rights as citizens of the United States and of Utah? And so being able to apply, what has already been, we have almost 250 years of case law, right, at our disposal. And so we can look and see what are some of the effects of the bills that have passed in other states, and how would it affect the economy, and how would it affect people's rights and liberties. And I think if we are taking away rights and liberties, we need to be really, really, really careful about that, because this is a land of freedom, and we don't want to take away freedoms.
Debbie.
Okay, my question is, what would you do if the overwhelming majority of constituents do not agree with your principle? Do you represent them or your principle?
So I got into this race because I wanted to represent people, and I would want to really understand the ideas behind what the people are pressing for. And then if the ideas behind that, what they're pressing for, doesn't agree with the principles that I've grown up with, then I would stick with my principles, even though it might make me unpopular. But as a representative, you're voted in by the people, so you do your best to represent the people, and then if the people go against the principle, then stick with the principle.
Knock your water.
Oh, yeah. It's got a cap on, so.
So yeah, that's a great question, and I think to start it out, I would say I would hope that if I get voted in, people agree with the principles that I have, and I don't think that there's going to be too many cases where this happens. But if it does, it would be on a case by case. I'd want to know. We'd wonder what would be so big of a divide between my principles and what the constituents think. So I need to look at that and see. Growing up in this area and being here, I'm not confident that that's going to happen very often. If it does, I would stick with principle, and I would explain myself. I would open myself to be able to understand why people are feeling the way that they are. I'd want to understand them. So maybe I'm misunderstood. Maybe there's things that I could learn from them. So I'd open it up. I'd want to have discussions before the vote is made. I'd want to know why there's a movement, an overwhelming movement, like you said. I'd want to know why that exists, and hopefully we can understand each other better and work from there.
Great. Ben, you've got a question?
I do. Well, much of my question was answered, but Christy Belt asked hers. I'll ask it again, maybe follow up with a second question that's not on the card. So I want to know, and I've heard a little bit about this, but I want to know your thoughts on tax policy as context. Pleasant Grove is entirely within the legislative district 57. Pleasant Grove has a comparatively high tax burden, has passed a new tax. The city passed a tax for roads earlier this year. We have, coming up in another month and a half, a number of significant tax increases we'll see on utility bills. So my question is on tax policy. Earlier this month, the city council voted for a resolution that asks for more tax increases. I want to know where you stand on that specific resolution that was passed by the city council urging the state to raise taxes, and what your own personal tax policies are, tax philosophies.
My tax philosophies are, I don't like them. Taxes are important. The government does have to function. There are some basic needs that needs to happen there. But my philosophy with taxes would be in this situation would be that before we ever ask for a tax increase or anything needs to happen, we really need to look at where we're spending money in other places. Because I would think that, I would hope that our elected officials would try to represent in the way that they would run their household. If the money's not there, you've got to do everything you can to reduce, to cut back, and to make it work. If the roof needs to be redone on your home, you're not going to go ask for more money from your employer to pay for the roof. So I would think that the government needs to function in the same way. Before we do anything like that and go and asking for a tax increase or passing new additional fees, things like that, I would really want to tighten the belt and see if we can't get the budget done. So that's my philosophy on taxes. So was the other part of the question, would I support it?
And where do you stand on a specific resolution passed earlier this month by the Pleasant Grove City Council?
I would be against it. Does that answer that?
So I think that there's reasons to have a tax and there's reasons to avoid a tax. We need to function as a society, and some of the things that the government provides, we need to raise money for, right? Specifically in regards to protection of life and liberty. I think that outside of those necessities, we need to be really careful about raising taxes. We should never raise taxes frivolously, right? We should never just raise a tax just because we need more money. We need, like Alex said, we need to budget. We need to make sure that we are living within our means, right? Even as a city, as a state, federal government's out of control. So we need to make sure that we're living within our means, but when there is a need for a tax, address the need and be done with the tax, right? Don't just continue to perpetuate the tax because something else comes up that we want. Does that make sense? And so, as far as this last tax that was raised, I think the city government really took a look at what the budget was, where they were spending the taxpayers' money, and did the best that they could with trying to find ways to fund this recent initiative, specifically with the roads, and decided that we needed to raise a road fee for the city. So I think that they were appropriate in their approach to raising this tax.
Did that answer, was that both your questions, or did you have
That
a?
answered part of the questions that were on the card, and I wanted to ask another question, if I may. My other question is about public lands. It's a big issue oftentimes in the state legislature. How can we push back against the federal government, get control of our Utah lands? What are your thoughts on public lands, and what can you do specifically? What will you do if elected?
I think that the public lands should belong to the state that they're in, right? And not the federal government as much as possible. So I would want to address that at the state level and address it with the federal government as well, and try to get, Utah's, I can't remember what the percentage is anymore, but it's a very high percentage. 65% owned by the federal government. That's too much. It's way too much. And we need to take control. The saying, government is best when it's closer to the people. Lands are best when they're owned closer to the people as well. So.
Well, this is one of the areas where I ate humble pie with Donald Trump, and it tasted okay when he reduced the size of Bears Ears, and I was in support of that. Yeah, the government owns way too much of Utah, and it's too much. this is an area that really needs to be addressed. We can do better with our own lands that are in our state. John said it. The state, the boundaries, that we ought to be able to control. We know them better than somebody in Washington. People that have never been to Utah are making decisions on what we can do with our land, and it just doesn't seem right to me. That's not liberty. I would definitely say that we need to own as much of the state, if not all of it, as possible, as a state.
Great. Our time?
6:34.
And for John?
At 5:09.
Excellent. We have come to our last card. And so I'm going to ask, because there's no name on here, but I'm going to ask some of these rapid fire because they've given a great list of issues that it would be interesting to hear your quicker opinions on these. And so, Alex, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you 1, 2, 3, 4 things for your opinion on them. Okay. The other things that were on the card, I think we've already addressed, which were some infrastructure, taxation, President Trump, the Constitution, the rule of law, but here's some things that weren't covered. What's your position, Alex, on, and I think we can stop timing, this is our last, so you're, all right. And so the Second Amendment.
So the Second Amendment is important to me. So I would be fully supportive of the Second Amendment. If I could elaborate on that, I also think that looking at a constitutional carry bill in the state would be a great idea. And I would also look, if we couldn't do that, look at where we could get reciprocity with other states to help people to, exercise their Second Amendment right.
States' rights.
States' rights are huge, and we kind of touched on that. I think that this is where the founders originally wanted it. They wanted the rights to be within this. The government, the real decisions need to be made within the state level, I think, and then even closer to the people as possible. So states' rights are huge, they're important to me. Where the federal government needs to stay out, they need to stay out.
Immigration.
Immigration, I think we ought to enforce the laws that exist. There's issues with immigration. I've got a sister-in-law who is from Canada, been married to my brother for 12 years, I want to say, just became a citizen. And the process is crazy, drawn out and difficult. So there's things that need to happen there. We need to be able to take the good people in that want to come in, but we need to tighten up the existing laws that are there. I'm not for sanctuary cities. I think we need to enforce the law.
And the federal government, Washington, D.C.
It's broken, and hopefully we can fix it. The federal government needs to stay in its place. Like I said, the state really needs to be the decision maker. I think that where you can take the decisions away from Washington and put them into our state, we're going to be a lot better off. Let the federal government deal with the things that they need to deal with. Let them deal with North Korea. Let them deal with defense issues like that. Don't bother us at the state level where we're able and capable of handling it.
Great. John?
Second Amendment.
No, I'm going to start with the federal government, Washington, D.C.
Great. Personally, I think the federal government does need to step out of the way. We've got too many people that have withdrawn to their corners and we don't get anything done back there. So as much as I love Washington, D.C., the federal government isn't what I love about Washington, D.C.
States' rights.
Wow, you're going all over the place.
I'm crazy. Out of control.
Yeah. States' rights, it's guaranteed in the Constitution that any right not specifically written in the Constitution is granted to the states. We need to enforce that. We need to make sure that our state is governing our state as much as it should be. And we need to get the federal government out of the states.
Immigration.
This is a tricky one. There's a lot of really good people in Utah that are contributing members to society that come from foreign places. Your sister-in-law, I imagine, is one of those people that's a contributing member of society. I think we need to make the process for citizenship a little bit more streamlined. I'm not going to say easier, but more streamlined. We need to give people the opportunity to move to America. I mean, we're all immigrants here anyway, right? We all come from a different place. Our heritage isn't, my heritage isn't Utah. And so we need to make citizenship a more streamlined path for those that are going to be contributing members of society.
Second Amendment.
I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I think we need to make sure that, it goes back to the medical marijuana issue that we talked about. I said something about it. It's a slippery slope. If we start taking away constitutionally guaranteed rights, where does it end? The big debate right now with the Second Amendment is school shootings, and I'm not positive that it's a gun issue. It might be a gun issue. It might be a mental health issue. It might be a societal issue. We don't know the answers because I don't think we have people that are willing to sit down and talk to each other about what the answer might be. And that's the problem with Washington, going back to that first question that you asked me. We need people that are willing to sit down and talk about the issues at hand and in a more robust and consensus-building way, rather than let's retreat to our corners and call it a gun issue. I don't think it's a gun issue. I think it's a much bigger issue than we are talking about right now.
Thank you, candidates. Let's give them a big hand. We need to vacate the building at 8:45, but candidates, if you want to go back and mingle with people and answer more questions, you'll have an opportunity to meet with them. Thank you. Thanks.